Patrick Gray's world explodes into chaos as the Voth aphrodisiac hits his system. One moment he's at a formal dinner in the bustling intergalactic trading hub. The next he's fighting for composure as his body betrays him. The potent alien substance, never meant for human consumption, ignites a firestorm in his veins. Across the room, Una, a high-ranking Voth female, freezes mid-conversation. Her nostrils flare, catching an intoxicating scent that overpowers her senses. Her eyes lock onto Patrick, pupils dilating with sudden, intense desire. Other Voth females nearby react similarly, heads turning in unison toward the source of the irresistible pheromones. Ambassador Sarah Holmes notices the shift in atmosphere immediately. She watches in growing alarm as Voth females begin to gravitate towards Patrick, their usual decorum forgotten. Patrick, sweat beading on his forehead, grips the edge of the table, struggling to maintain his diplomatic facade. Tension crackles through the air as Voth males, including Security Chief Zorn, bristle at the unusual attention directed at the human diplomat. Zorn's hand moves to his weapon, eyes narrowing with suspicion and hostility. The situation deteriorates rapidly. Una, overcome by the aphrodisiac's effects, pushes through the crowd. She reaches for Patrick, her intentions clear as she initiates a mating ritual in full view of the shocked dignitaries. Gasps and murmurs ripple through the assembly. Ambassador Holmes springs into action, inserting herself between Patrick and Una. "Cultural misunderstanding," she declares loudly, her voice steady despite the crisis. "Mr. Gray requires immediate medical attention." As Holmes calls for a medical team, Patrick's knees buckle. The room spins, alien faces blurring around him. He's vaguely aware of being lifted, carried swiftly through corridors to the hub's medical bay. Dr. Elara Voss, human xenobiologist, snaps into action as Patrick is rushed in. Her eyes widen as she scans his vitals, noting the unprecedented chemical reaction taking place in his bloodstream. "This is extraordinary," she breathes, mind racing with the potential implications. News of the incident spreads like wildfire through the hub. Alien species from every corner of the galaxy perk up their ears, antennae, or sensory organs at the whispers of a new, powerful compound born from the marriage of Voth and human biology. In the corridors outside the medical bay, tensions mount. Ambassador Holmes stands firm, declaring Patrick's condition a matter of human national security. She orders a lockdown, her comlink buzzing with urgent requests for military backup. Inside, Patrick's fevered mind clears enough to grasp the gravity of his situation. He's become the center of a political and scientific storm that threatens to reshape galactic relations. Through the haze of the aphrodisiac, a realization dawns. His body's unique reaction might be the key to bridging the gap between humans and Voth. A commotion outside draws his attention. Una, still under the influence of his pheromones, attempts to breach the medical bay's defenses. The sounds of a scuffle erupt as she clashes with Voth's security forces. As alarms blare and diplomats argue, Patrick Gray lies at the eye of the storm. His accidental ingestion of a Voth aphrodisiac has set in motion events that will challenge the boundaries of interspecies relations, forcing humans and aliens alike to confront new possibilities and dangers in their shared galaxy. As Patrick lay in the medical bay, the effects of the Voth aphrodisiac still coursing through his system, he became acutely aware of the commotion beyond the doors. The clash between Una and the security forces echoed through the sterile room, a stark reminder of the chaos he'd inadvertently unleashed. Dr. Elara Voss bent over her workstation, her brow furrowed in concentration as she analyzed the latest batch of test results. Her eyes widened, and she let out a soft gasp. "This is incredible," she murmured, quickly tapping commands into her datapad. Patrick struggled to sit up, his body still racked with tremors. "What is it, doctor?" he managed to ask, his voice hoarse. Dr. Voss turned to him, her eyes alight with excitement. "Mr. Gray, your body's reaction to the Voth aphrodisiac has produced a unique biochemical signature. It's unlike anything I've ever seen before. The implications are, well, they're staggering." Before she could elaborate, the doors to the medical bay slid open with a hiss. Ambassador Sarah Holmes strode in, her face a mask of hardly restrained tension. "Dr. Voss, I need a full report on Mr. Gray's condition immediately. We have a situation developing out there." As Dr. Voss began to explain her findings, Patrick's attention drifted. Through the open doorway, he caught a glimpse of Una being restrained by security personnel. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Patrick felt a jolt of electricity course through him. It was more than just the aphrodisiac now. There was something else, a connection he couldn't quite explain. Ambassador Holmes's voice snapped him back to reality. "A fertility treatment? Are you certain?" Dr. Voss nodded emphatically. "The preliminary data suggests that Patrick's altered biochemistry could potentially address reproductive issues in several species, including the Voth. It's early, but the possibilities are profound." Holmes paced the room, her mind clearly racing. "This changes everything. The diplomatic implications alone." She turned to Patrick. "Mr. Gray, I know you're still recovering, but I need you to understand the gravity of this situation. Your condition may have just opened the door to a new era of interspecies cooperation." Patrick struggled to process the information. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, his voice steadier now. "For now, we need you to remain here under observation," Holmes replied. "I'm going to initiate talks with the Voth High Council. We need to move quickly before word of this spreads too far." As if on cue, alarms began to blare throughout the medical bay. Dr. Voss rushed to a nearby console, her fingers flying over the controls. "We have a security breach," she announced, her voice tense. "Multiple unauthorized access attempts to our research data." Holmes cursed under her breath. "It's already started. We need to lock this down now." She tapped her comm device, issuing rapid-fire orders to her staff. In the midst of the growing chaos, the doors to the medical bay slid open once more. Una stood in the doorway, her chest heaving, eyes locked on Patrick. Security personnel appeared behind her, weapons drawn. "Stand down," Holmes barked at the security team. She turned to Una, her voice carefully controlled. "Madam, I understand you're affected by this situation, but I must insist you leave immediately. This is a secure area." Una took a step forward, her gaze never leaving Patrick. I can't explain it," she said, her voice trembling, "but I need to be here. Something is happening, something important." Dr. Voss, who had been monitoring Patrick's vital signs, suddenly exclaimed, "His biochemical levels are shifting. Una's presence is triggering additional changes." Holmes looked from Una to Patrick, then to Dr. Voss. "Is this dangerous?" "No," Dr. Voss replied, her eyes glued to her instruments. "In fact, it might be the key to unlocking the full potential of this discovery." Patrick, feeling a strange mix of attraction and scientific curiosity, made a decision. "Let her stay," he said firmly. "If it can help, I'm willing to see this through." As Una approached Patrick's bedside, the alarms continued to blare. Holmes received an urgent message on her comm device. "We have multiple security breaches throughout the hub," she reported grimly, "and reports of a protest forming outside the Central Administration Building. This is escalating faster than we anticipated." Dr. Voss, now working feverishly at her station, added, "I'm detecting an unknown pathogen spreading through the ventilation system. It appears to be targeting human and Voth physiology." Patrick, acutely aware of Una's presence beside him, felt a surge of grit. "Doctor," he said, his voice stronger than he felt, "could my altered biochemistry help create a cure for this pathogen?" Dr. Voss's eyes lit up with realization. "Theoretically, yes, but we'd need to act fast, and the process would be risky." As the situation spiraled into chaos around them, Patrick locked eyes with Una. In that moment, despite the language barrier and the vast differences between their species, an understanding passed between them. They were at the center of a storm that could reshape the galaxy, and the choices they made in the coming hours would echo across the stars. Patrick took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "Let's do it," he said, extending his arm to Dr. Voss. "We don't have a moment to lose." As Patrick steeled himself for the procedure, a loud bang echoed through the medical bay. Alarms blared, their harsh wail cutting through the tense atmosphere. Dr. Voss's eyes widened as she glanced at the monitoring screens. The Krell virus, she exclaimed, her fingers flying over the control panel. It's spreading through the ventilation system. Patrick's heart raced as he processed the implications. The situation had just become exponentially more dangerous. He locked eyes with Dr. Voss, a silent understanding passing between them. We need to act fast, Patrick said, his voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. My altered biochemistry might be the key to creating a cure. Dr. Voss nodded, her expression a mix of commitment and concern. It's risky, but you're right. We don't have any other options. As they prepared to begin their work, the doors to the medical bay slid open. Ambassador Holmes rushed in, her usually composed demeanor shaken. We have a full-scale crisis on our hands, she announced, her voice tight with stress. I'm coordinating evacuation efforts for the uninfected, but we need that cure as soon as possible. Patrick glanced at Una, who stood resolutely by his side. Despite the increasing danger, she showed no signs of leaving. Her presence, once a complication, now felt like a lifeline. Una, you should go, Patrick urged, even as a part of him hoped she'd stay. It's not safe here. The Voth female shook her head, her eyes filled with drive. I stay, she said, her grasp of the human language limited, but her intention clear. Dr. Voss, who had been rapidly setting up equipment, suddenly looked up. Wait, she said, her eyes lighting up with realization. Una's Voth biology, combined with Patrick's unique condition, it could accelerate the development of the antidote. Without hesitation, Una extended her arm, offering herself as part of the experiment. Patrick felt a surge of admiration for her bravery. As they worked feverishly to synthesize a cure, the sounds of chaos from outside the medical bay grew louder. Suddenly, the doors burst open again. Security Chief Zorn strode in, his imposing figure filling the doorway. Patrick tensed, remembering the Voth's earlier hostility, but to his surprise, Zorn's demeanor had changed. I've seen your actions, human, Zorn said, his voice gruff but not unkind. You risk yourself for others. This is admirable. He turned to address the room. I will use my authority to maintain order and protect this facility. Focus on your work. With Zorn's unexpected support, the team redoubled their efforts. Hours blurred together as they raced against time, the virus spreading rapidly through the hub. Just as they neared a breakthrough, alarms blared again. This time, it wasn't the virus. Intruders, Zorn shouted, drawing his weapon. Krell infiltrators. The doors exploded inward, and chaos erupted. Krell agents, their features hidden behind dark masks, poured into the medical bay. Their target was clear, Patrick. They want your blood, Dr. Voss yelled, trying to shield Patrick. They think it's the key to creating bioweapons. Before Patrick could react, a blur of motion caught his eye. Una leaped into action, her movements fluid and deadly. She engaged the first Krell agent, her combat skills a shocking revelation. Zorn joined the fray, his earlier mistrust of the humans forgotten in the heat of battle. Together, Una and Zorn formed a formidable defense, their interspecies cooperation a sight that would have been unthinkable mere hours ago. As the fight raged on, Patrick and Dr. Voss worked frantically to complete the antidote. The prototype was ready, but there was only enough for one person. We need to test it, Dr. Voss said, her voice strained. She gestured to an infected Voth scientist who had stumbled into the medical bay seeking help. Dr. Thala volunteered. Without hesitation, Patrick grabbed the vial. Do it, he said, handing it to Dr. Voss. We have to know if it works. As Dr. Voss administered the antidote to Dr. Thala, the battle against the Krell infiltrators reached its climax. Una and Zorn, working in perfect tandem, managed to subdue the last of the attackers. Silence fell over the medical bay, broken only by the beeping of medical equipment and the labored breathing of the combatants. All eyes turned to Dr. Thala, waiting to see if the antidote would take effect. Seconds stretched into minutes. Then miraculously, Dr. Thala's vital signs began to stabilize. The antidote was working. A collective sigh of relief swept through the room, but it was short-lived. The victory was only the beginning. They now faced the monumental task of producing enough antidote for the entire hub, with resources dwindling and time running out. As if sensing the weight of the challenge ahead, Una moved to Patrick's side. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the connection between them deepened, transcending the initial pheromone-induced attraction. But before they could celebrate their small victory, a new alarm sounded. Dr. Voss's face paled as she read the incoming data. "The virus," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's mutating." The realization hit them all. Their hard-won breakthrough might already be obsolete. As the newly aggressive strain of the virus threatened to overwhelm the hub's population, Patrick and Una exchanged a look of relentless drive. They knew that an even greater challenge lay ahead, one that would test not only their science, but also their growing bond. The fate of the trading hub, and perhaps the future of human-Voth relations, now hung in the balance. And at the center of it all stood Patrick and Una, an unlikely pair brought together by chance and chemistry, now united in their fight against an enemy that threatened all species equally. The realization of the virus's mutation sent a shockwave through the medical bay. Patrick and Una exchanged a look of steadfast perseverance, their newfound connection strengthening their determination. Dr. Voss's voice cut through the tense silence. "We need to act fast. The only way to combat this new strain is to combine your unique physiologies." Patrick nodded, his heart racing. "What do we need to do?" "It's risky," Dr. Voss warned, already preparing a series of syringes. "We'll need to perform a series of injections and expose you both to specific radiation frequencies. The process could be intense." Una stepped forward, her scales gleaming under the harsh medical lights. "We ready," she said, her limited English conveying her unwavering commitment. As Dr. Voss began the procedure, Ambassador Holmes burst into the room, her face etched with worry. "The situation outside is deteriorating rapidly. We need that cure yesterday." Patrick gritted his teeth as the first injection burned through his veins. "We're working on it," he managed to say, his vision blurring slightly. The next hours passed in a haze of pain and disorientation. Patrick felt as if his body was being torn apart and reassembled at a molecular level. Beside him, Una endured the process with stoic resilience, her occasional hisses of pain the only indication of her discomfort. As the final stage of the procedure began, alarms blared throughout the hub. Captain Marcus Steele's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing new quarantine measures. "We're sealing off entire sections," he said, his tone grim. "It's our only chance to contain the spread." Dr. Voss worked feverishly, her eyes darting between her patients and the rapidly changing data on her screens. "It's working," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "Their biochemistries are merging in ways I've never seen before." As the procedure concluded, Patrick and Una collapsed, their bodies drained from the ordeal. Dr. Voss immediately set to work, using samples from both to synthesize a new antidote. Days blurred together as Patrick and Una recovered, drifting in and out of consciousness. The hub around them descended into chaos, with reports of violence and panic filtering through to their isolated medical bay. When Patrick finally regained full awareness, he found the situation had drastically changed. Security Chief Zorn burst into the room, his scales dark with exertion. "We have a problem," he growled. "Krell infiltrators are still in the hub. They're after the antidote formula." Before anyone could respond, the sound of gunfire erupted outside. Zorn spun around, weapon at the ready, as the doors to the medical bay slid open. A group of masked figures stormed in, their movements precise and deadly. Dr. Voss screamed as one of them grabbed her, attempting to access her data terminal. Patrick tried to stand, but his weakened body betrayed him. He watched helplessly as Zorn engaged the intruders, his combat skills impressive but outnumbered. Suddenly, a blur of motion caught Patrick's eye. Una, seemingly recovered faster than him, leaped into action. Her movements were fluid, a perfect blend of Voth strength and a new, almost human agility. Together, Una and Zorn managed to subdue the Krell agents, but the victory was short-lived. Alarms blared again, this time accompanied by a new voice over the intercom. "Attention all residents of the trading hub," a female voice announced, her tone cold and authoritative. "This is Kala Vor. We have taken control of the Central Administration Building. All non-Voth species are hereby ordered to surrender themselves for immediate expulsion. Patrick's heart sank as he realized the full extent of their new crisis. They had barely survived one threat, only to face another, potentially more dangerous one. As if reading his thoughts, Una approached his bed, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and perseverance. "We face this together," she said, her English improving along with their shared biology. Patrick nodded, feeling a surge of strength despite his weakened state. He knew that their unique status, a human with Voth traits and a Voth with human characteristics, might be the key to resolving this new conflict. As they prepared to face this unexpected challenge, Patrick couldn't help but wonder what other surprises their altered physiologies might hold. The trading hub teetered on the brink of chaos, and he and Una stood at the center of a storm that threatened to reshape the very fabric of interspecies relations. The implications of their transformation were only beginning to unfold. As the days passed, the trading hub gradually stabilized. The immediate threat of the virus had been contained, thanks to the antidote developed from Patrick and Una's unique biochemistry. However, their ordeal was a long way to go. Patrick noticed it first, the way Voth females' eyes lingered on him as he walked through the corridors. Their reactions seemed more intense than the initial pheromone-induced attraction he had experienced upon arrival. Una, too, found herself drawing unprecedented attention from human males. Dr. Voss, observing these changes with growing concern, called them both to the medical bay for a series of tests. As she analyzed the results, her eyes widened. "This is remarkable," she said, her voice a mix of awe and apprehension. "The procedure you underwent has altered your biochemistry in ways we never anticipated. Your pheromones have evolved, creating a bridge between human and Voth biology." Patrick and Una exchanged glances, the weight of this revelation settling over them. "What does this mean for us?" Patrick asked, his hand unconsciously seeking Una's. Dr. Voss's expression turned grave. "It means you're at the center of a potential revolution in interspecies relations. Your bodies are producing compounds that foster attraction and empathy between humans and Voth. The implications are staggering." Before they could fully process this information, alarms blared throughout the station. Captain Steele's voice crackled over the intercom, tension evident in his tone. "Attention all personnel. We have reports of unrest in the main concourse. All security teams report to your stations immediately." Patrick and Una rushed to the scene, their enhanced physical attributes allowing them to move with unprecedented speed and agility. They arrived to find chaos unfolding before them. A group of Voth separatists had gathered, their scales jam-packed with anger. They held signs denouncing interspecies mixing, their voices raised in protest. "Keep the species pure," one of them shouted, his words echoing through the concourse. As Security Chief Zorn attempted to contain the situation, Patrick noticed something odd. Despite the protesters' angry words, several Voth females in the crowd seemed distracted, their gazes repeatedly drawn to him and other human males present. Simultaneously, Una observed human males struggling to focus on the unfolding crisis, their attention continually shifting to her and other Voth females. The situation escalated rapidly. A young human male, seemingly overcome by the influence of the pheromones, approached a Voth female at the edge of the protest. To everyone's shock, instead of recoiling, she reached out to him, their hands intertwining. This display sparked a frenzy. Some protesters surged forward, attempting to separate the pair, while others in the crowd began to form similar spontaneous connections. Ambassador Holmes arrived on the scene, her face etched with concern. She pulled Patrick and Una aside, speaking in urgent tones. "We've received a proposal from the Voth High Council," she said, her words nearly drowned out by the commotion. "They want to initiate a breeding program, using you two as the prototype. They see it as a way to strengthen ties between our species." Patrick felt a surge of conflicting emotions. The idea was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. He looked at Una, seeing his own mix of feelings reflected in her eyes. Before they could respond, a commotion at the far end of the concourse caught their attention. A group of unfamiliar Voth females had entered, moving with purpose towards the gathered humans. Something about their demeanor set off alarm bells in Patrick's mind. Security Chief Zorn appeared at their side, his voice low and urgent. "We have intelligence from the Krell defectors, Ix. Those females are Krell operatives in disguise. They're here to exploit the situation." As the Krell agents advanced, Patrick and Una realized they stood at a crossroads. Their unique status as a human Voth couple placed them at the center of a rapidly escalating crisis. The choices they made in the coming moments would shape not just their own futures, but potentially the course of interspecies relations throughout the galaxy. The concourse had become a powder keg of conflicting agendas and raw emotions, with Patrick and Una's biochemistry acting as the spark. As they prepared to take action, both knew that the true test of their bond and their potential to bridge the gap between their species was only beginning. As Patrick and Una steeled themselves to confront the approaching Krell agents, the trading hub erupted into chaos. Alarms blared as explosions rocked the station. The Krell Empire had launched a surprise attack, catching everyone off guard. In the ensuing pandemonium, Patrick and Una found themselves separated. Patrick's newly enhanced physiology kicked into overdrive. He leaped over a fallen support beam, his Voth-augmented muscles propelling him forward with inhuman speed. Krell soldiers poured into the concourse, their weapons blazing. Patrick ducked and weaved, his reflexes sharper than ever before. "I need to reach the command center," he muttered, surveying the battlefield before him. With a burst of strength, he charged through a group of Krell, scattering them like bowling pins. Meanwhile, Una's heightened human intuition screamed danger. She spotted a group of terrified civilians cowering behind an overturned food kiosk. "This way," she called out, her voice carrying an unmistakable note of authority. "I know a safe route." Leading the group through maintenance tunnels and lesser-known corridors, Una marveled at her newfound ability to anticipate threats and strategize on the fly. Her Voth instincts, tempered with human adaptability, proved to be a powerful combination. In the command center, Ambassador Sarah Holmes and Security Chief Zorn worked feverishly to coordinate a defense. "We need to buy time," Holmes said, her fingers flying over a holographic interface. "Our forces are scattered." Zorn nodded grimly, his scales shifting color with stress. "The Krell caught us with our guards down. We need an edge." As if on cue, Dr. Alara Voss burst into the room, her lab coat singed and her hair disheveled. "I have an idea," she said breathlessly. "Patrick and Una's pheromones. We can weaponize them." Holmes raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "Their unique biochemistry produces compounds that enhance cooperation between humans and Voth," Voss said, pulling up data on a nearby screen. "If we can synthesize and disperse these pheromones, it could give our joint forces a significant boost." Zorn's eyes widened with understanding. "A chemical edge to our teamwork. Brilliant." As Voss set to work, Patrick finally reached the command center. "The Krell," he panted. "They're not just here for conquest. They're after something specific." Holmes nodded grimly. "We've intercepted communications. They're targeting our research data on human Voth biochemistry. Your data." Before Patrick could respond, alarms blared again. Zorn growled, checking the security feeds. "Krell commandos have breached the medical bay. They're after the research files." Patrick's heart raced. "I'm on it," he said, already turning to leave. "Wait," Voss called out, holding up a small canister. "Take this. It's a prototype of the pheromone compound. Use it if you need to coordinate with any of our forces." Patrick nodded, grasping the canister before sprinting out of the command center. As he navigated the chaos-filled corridors, Patrick's mind raced. Where was Una? Was she safe? He pushed the thoughts aside, focusing on the task at hand. Reaching the medical bay, Patrick found himself face-to-face with a squad of Krell commandos. They were attempting to decrypt the lab's data storage. Patrick uncapped the pheromone canister, releasing a fine mist into the air. Almost immediately, he felt a connection with the human and Voth security team that had just arrived as backup. Moving with unprecedented coordination, the joint force engaged the Krell. Patrick's enhanced strength and agility made him a formidable opponent. He ducked under a Krell energy blade, retaliating with a powerful uppercut that sent the alien flying. As the battle in the medical bay raged on, Yuna found herself in the environmental control room. Her group of civilians safely hidden, she realized she had an opportunity to turn the tide. Using her newfound problem-solving skills, Yuna interfaced with the hub's atmospheric controls. With a series of precise adjustments, she began altering the composition of the air in specific sectors. Oxygen levels increased in human Voss sectors, she murmured, her fingers dancing across the controls, introducing trace elements harmful to Krell physiology in their occupied areas. The effects were almost immediate. Reports flooded in of Krell forces struggling to breathe in certain sections, while human and Voth defenders found themselves energized and more focused. As Patrick secured the medical bay and Yuna continued her atmospheric assault, the tide of battle began to shift. The Voth High Council, monitoring the situation from afar, made an unprecedented decision. A hidden panel in the hub's central spire slid open, revealing a massive, pulsating crystal. It was a long-hidden Voth superweapon, capable of turning the tide of the battle decisively. However, as the weapon powered up, it became clear that its operation required something unique, a Voth and a human working in perfect synchronization. As if drawn by an invisible force, Patrick and Yuna found themselves converging on the central spire. Their eyes met across the chaos of battle, a silent understanding passing between them. They approached the crystal, its energy making their skin tingle. As they placed their hands on the control interface, something extraordinary happened. Their minds connected, thoughts and feelings flowing freely between them. In that moment, as the super weapon hummed to life under their touch, Patrick and Yuna realized that their journey of transformation was just the beginning. The battle for the trading hub raged on, but the true test of their newfound abilities and their bond was just beginning. The crystal pulsed with energy, its light intensifying as Patrick and Yuna's minds melded. In that moment of connection, they both realized the gravity of their situation and the potential they held to turn the tide of battle. But as the weapon powered up, Dr. Voss burst into the chamber, her eyes wide with urgency. "Wait," she called out, her voice cutting through the humming energy. "We have another option." Patrick and Yuna turned, their hands still on the crystal. "What is it?" Patrick asked, his voice strained. Dr. Voss held up a vial of shimmering liquid. "A sedative. If we can synthesize it using your enhanced biochemistry, we might be able to neutralize the Krell threat without resorting to a weapon of mass destruction." Yuna's eyes met Patrick's, a silent communication passing between them. They nodded in unison and stepped away from the crystal. "Let's do it," Yuna said, her voice firm. The next few minutes were a blur of activity. They rushed to the medical bay, where Dr. Voss worked with frantic precision. Patrick and Yuna lay on adjacent beds, connected to a maze of tubes and wires. "This will be risky," Dr. Voss warned as she prepared the procedure. "The strain on your systems will be significant." Patrick reached out, grasping Yuna's hand. "We're ready," he said. As Dr. Voss began the process, pain coursed through their bodies. Patrick gritted his teeth, feeling as if his veins were on fire. Beside him, Yuna's scales rippled with tension. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Finally, Dr. Voss exclaimed, "It's done!" She held up a vial of pale blue liquid, triumph in her eyes. Patrick and Yuna sat up slowly, their bodies weak, but their persistence unshaken. As they recovered, Captain Steele and Security Chief Zorn entered the medical bay. "We have a plan to deploy the sedative," Steele announced, his voice tight with urgency. "We'll use the hub's air filtration system to disperse it throughout the station." Zorn nodded, his scales shifting with anticipation. It should affect both the Krell invaders and the Voth separatists. As the team rushed to implement the plan, Patrick and Yuna insisted on joining despite their weakened state. They made their way to the environmental control room, where Yuna had previously manipulated the atmosphere. With trembling hands, they helped load the sedative into the filtration system. As the compound began to circulate, they watched the security feeds with nervous excitement. Across the hub, Krell soldiers and Voth separatists alike began to sway on their feet. Weapons clattered to the ground as combatants slumped against walls or collapsed where they stood. "It's working," Patrick breathed, relief flooding through him. As the fighting subsided, Ambassador Holmes seized the moment. "I'm going to the Krell flagship," she announced over the comm. "We need to end this now." Patrick and Una exchanged glances. "We're coming with you," Patrick said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Despite their exhaustion, they accompanied Holmes to the Krell ship. As they entered the command deck, Patrick felt the familiar tingle of their pheromones at work, enhancing the atmosphere of cooperation. The Krell commander, a towering figure with iridescent scales, regarded them with a mix of wariness and curiosity. Holmes stepped forward, her posture confident. "We propose a trade," she said, her voice steady. "Limited data on human Voth biochemistry in exchange for your immediate withdrawal and the deactivation of the quantum bomb." The Krell commander's eyes narrowed. "And why should we agree to this?" Holmes gestured to Patrick and Una. "Because what you see here is just the beginning. This is the future of interspecies cooperation, and you can either be part of it or be left behind." As negotiations continued, Patrick and Una stood side by side, their presence a living testament to the potential Holmes spoke of. They could feel the Krell's interest, their scientific curiosity warring with their military objectives. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. The Krell commander snarled, turning to a subordinate. "What's happening?" "A team of our commandos," the subordinate reported. "They're immune to the sedative. They're making a final push for the human Voth research data in the medical bay." Patrick's heart raced. "We need to stop them," he said, locking eyes with Una. As they turned to leave, they felt a sudden shift in their mental connection. The bond that had allowed them to communicate telepathically now felt deeper, more intimate. Thoughts and emotions flowed between them with startling clarity. They raced back to the hub, their movements in perfect sync. As they approached the medical bay, they could hear the sounds of battle. Patrick and Una burst into the room, finding a scene of chaos. Krell commandos were engaged in fierce combat with a mixed team of human and Voth defenders. Without a word, Patrick and Una sprang into action. Their enhanced abilities, coupled with their newfound mental connection, allowed them to move as one. They anticipated each other's moves, covering blind spots and striking in tandem. As they fought, Patrick sensed a surge of alarm from Una. He turned just in time to see a Krell soldier aiming an energy weapon at him. Without hesitation, Una threw herself in front of Patrick. The energy blast caught her in the side, sending her spinning to the ground. "Una!" Patrick cried out, his voice filled with anguish. As medical teams rushed to Una's aid, Patrick felt a wave of pain and disorientation that wasn't his own. Through their mental link, he could sense Una's body undergoing rapid changes. Dr. Voss, who had arrived with the medical team, gasped as she examined Una. "This is unprecedented," she muttered, her eyes wide with a mix of concern and scientific fascination. "The combination of the sedative procedure and the injury, it's accelerating her hybridization process." Patrick knelt beside Una, grasping her hand. He could feel her confusion and fear, but also a sense of wonder at the changes coursing through her body. As the last of the Krell commandos were subdued, a tense calm settled over the hub. Patrick looked up to see Ambassador Holmes entering the medical bay, her face etched with both relief and concern. "The Krell have agreed to withdraw," she announced, "but this is just the beginning. We have a lot of work ahead of us." Patrick nodded, his gaze returning to Una. As he watched her scales shift and change, he knew that their journey, and the challenges they would face, were not nearly finished. Over. Patrick's gaze lingered on Una's still form, her scales now a mesmerizing blend of human and Voth patterns. The medical bay hummed with activity as Dr. Voss and her team worked tirelessly to monitor Una's condition. Days turned into weeks, and the trading hub began to recover from the Krell attack. Patrick divided his time between assisting with repairs and sitting by Una's side, hoping for any sign of improvement. One afternoon, as Patrick entered the medical bay for his daily visit, he found Dr. Voss studying a holographic display of Una's genetic structure. "How is she?" Patrick asked, his voice tinged with concern. Dr. Voss turned, her eyes bright with excitement. "Patrick, her hybridization has stabilized. It's remarkable. The fusion of human and Voth DNA is unlike anything we've ever seen." Before Patrick could respond, A commotion at the entrance caught their attention. Ambassador Holmes strode in, her face a mask of barely suppressed enthusiasm. "Patrick, Dr. Voss, I have news," she announced, her voice filled with purpose. "The success of our alliance has caught the attention of the galactic community. A coalition of species has proposed the establishment of an interstellar cooperative research initiative with our hub as its headquarters." Patrick's eyebrows shot up. "That's incredible. What does this mean for us?" As Holmes explained the details of the initiative, Patrick's mind raced. He glanced at Yuna's unconscious form, then back at the ambassador and Dr. Voss. "I have an idea," he said, his voice gaining strength. "What if we use our unique biochemistry as a template for a new kind of diplomatic corps? Hybrid ambassadors, capable of bridging the gap between species like never before." The room fell silent as the implications of his suggestion sank in. Dr. Voss was the first to speak, her voice a mix of caution and excitement. "It's risky, but the potential benefits—" "I'll present it to the Voth High Council and our leadership," Holmes said, nodding decisively. "This could change everything." As debates raged over the proposal, Patrick maintained his vigil at Yuna's side. Weeks stretched into months, and the hub transformed around them. New laboratories sprang up, and representatives from dozens of species arrived to participate in the budding initiative. Then on a day like any other, Patrick felt a subtle shift in his mental connection with Yuna. Her consciousness, dormant for so long, flickered to life. "Dr. Voss," Patrick called out, his heart racing. "I think she's waking up." The medical team rushed to the bedside as Yuna's eyes fluttered open. She blinked, taking in her surroundings with a mix of confusion and wonder. "Patrick?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. "What happened?" As Patrick explained the events of the past months, Dr. Voss ran a battery of tests. Her excitement grew with each result. "Yuna, your hybridization is complete," Dr. Voss announced, "and it's stable in a way we never thought possible. This changes everything." Yuna's awakening accelerated the plans for the ICRI. As she regained her strength, she and Patrick found their mental connection had deepened even further. They discovered they could extend their telepathic link to others, bridging the communication gap between species with ease. This ability proved invaluable as the first group of volunteer diplomats arrived at the hub. Representing a dozen different species, they had come to undergo the pioneering genetic modification procedure based on Patrick and Yuna's template. As Dr. Voss and her multi-species team of scientists prepared for the first procedures, an unexpected message arrived. The Krell Empire, impressed by the power of human-Voth cooperation, expressed interest in joining the ICRI. The proposal sent shockwaves through the coalition leadership. Patrick and Yuna, recognizing the gravity of the situation, offered to meet with the Krell representatives personally. In a specially prepared chamber, they faced the Krell diplomats. The air was thick with tension as Patrick and Yuna extended their telepathic abilities, probing the intentions behind the Krell's words. "We sense no deception," Yuna announced after an intense mental exchange. "Their desire to join is genuine." With their unique insight, Patrick and Yuna convinced the coalition to accept a probationary Krell membership in the ICRI. It was a decision that would shape the future of galactic relations. As the day of the ICRI's official inauguration approached, the hub buzzed with anticipation. The Grand Assembly Hall, once a simple marketplace, had been transformed into a shining symbol of interstellar cooperation. Patrick and Yuna stood backstage, preparing to address the gathered representatives. Their hands intertwined, a physical representation of the bond that now extended far beyond just the two of them. "Ready?" Patrick asked, his voice soft but steady. Yuna nodded, her scales shimmering with a mix of human and Voth patterns. "Together," she replied. As they stepped onto the stage facing the assembled delegates from across the galaxy, they knew that their journey was far from finished. The ICRI was just the beginning, a first step towards a future where the boundaries between species faded away. Patrick squeezed Yuna's hand, and together they began to speak. Their words carried not just by their voices, but by the telepathic connection that now extended to every being in the hall. Their story, from accidental encounter to defenders of the hub, unfolded before the rapt audience. As they spoke, Patrick and Una could feel the minds of those around them opening, barriers falling away. The shared consciousness they created in that moment was unlike anything the galaxy had ever known. The assembly hall fell silent as their tale came to an end. Then as one, the delegates rose to their feet, a thunderous applause echoing through the chamber. In that moment, Patrick and Una knew that they had changed not just their own lives, but the course of galactic history. As the applause died down, Ambassador Holmes approached the podium. And now, she announced, her voice carrying a hint of anticipation, Patrick and Una will lead us in a unity ritual, combining elements from both human and Voth cultures. Patrick and Una moved to the center of the stage, their movements perfectly synchronized. As they began the ritual, their telepathic abilities magnified, enveloping the entire assembly in a moment of shared consciousness that would be remembered for generations to come.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.